Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. Today is a great day. I hope you're having a great day. I certainly am, because I have as my guest today on the show one of the most amazing human beings that I know. He has such passion in what he does. He has such connection to a vision, to a mission of serving people, that it is an absolute story that needs to be told. And as you know, here on the Difference Makers podcast, I, your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, get a chance to meet with these kind of people, visit with them, and share this information with you every week. Today is no exception, as I get the chance to visit with Mr. CG, we call him, Clarence Gamble, from our office here at Ramos Law. He's an outstanding attorney, incredible advocate for people who have been injured, people who have they don't have a champion, and he steps up and steps in. So today we're going to have this incredible conversation. You're going to love it. You're going to be inspired to do something great in your life after what you hear he's done in his life and for the lives of others. So I got to get started on this. CG, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's great to be here.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this for a while, right?
Indeed we have.
I know that you are so busy taking care of clients and doing what you do. I watch you and I admire. You were here before I was here.
Okay.
And so when I got here, I remember going into your office and just talking with you, and the intensity and the passion that you have as you communicate for what you feel to be right for these people. It made an impression on me day one, and I have never lost that. Just we have our core values here, and one of them is care deeply, and one of them is pursue excellence, and one of them is put others first. And you do that in spades every day. Is that something, that passion, that you've had in your whole life, or is that something that you gained as you got older?
It was a progression. It's more of, I've always liked to stick up for the little guy. When I was growing up as a kid in the 70s and the 80s, bullying was a real problem, but it was not as focused on in school. So it was a matter of sinking or swimming. And oftentimes, I found myself aligned with those who had been bullied, because I had suffered from that as well. And I always wanted to be in a position where I could try to help out a person in that situation. It kind of lended itself to what I do now, which I see myself as helping people out who can't help themselves, be it in an injury situation, be it in a someone who's perhaps being mistreated because of the color of their skin, or because they're a woman, or because they're elderly. It's just something that it sticks with me, and it rubs me the wrong way. And when I see people who are unable to protect themselves from a legal standpoint, I feel, that's my duty, to try to help them out.
What a great duty. I want to rewind the clock a little bit, and I want to go back to your childhood. You grew up in Nevada?
Yeah, my mom and dad moved us from the state of Texas to Las Vegas, Nevada in the early 70s. My dad and his dad's dad were all concrete people. They finished concrete for a living. My dad started a small concrete construction business in the city where I was born, Breckenridge, Texas, a small West Texas town. And he had become successful. And as you'd imagine, this is in the early to late 60s, when racial discrimination was rampant. And in this rural community where my dad was from, once he started growing, his business started growing, he became the target of discrimination, and there was an effort to keep him from buying concrete, which he could use to do his job.
So you guys were in a mostly white suburban kind of small Texas town. That's why, as opposed to that, or were you guys in a really good racially mixed town, but then where he was trying to buy the concrete from, they were the ones that were seeing him as, you're not worthy or some nonsense?
Well, it's a small town. The concrete contractors who were working there primarily were white. My dad was the only black contractor there. He did good work. When he started to get bigger, they stopped selling him concrete. So instead of allowing his family to languish in that community, he moved to Las Vegas. Now, when we moved to Las Vegas, there wasn't an opportunity for him to right away get into his own business. So he started working, for a different concrete contractor as an employee. And he also worked as a porter in the casinos just to make ends meet. So my dad worked, 19, 20 hours a day. I remember once on my way to school, seeing him in his pickup truck, one leg in, one leg out, passed out. He had just finished an 8-hour shift working at a casino.
Oh my goodness. That obviously left a huge impression on you to this day. In the moment, did that have anything that, did you understand the impact of what was happening in that moment? Or was that something that took a while to settle into your soul as far as what a sacrifice he was making to take care of you guys?
It was something that certainly left an impression upon me. It pushed me, it drove me, it motivated me. One thing I knew that I took away from it was hard work and supportive family. So seeing him go work so hard and push so hard and for his family, it was sort of a foundational drive and motivation for myself. So, he was not a very educated man. And for what it was worth, I exhibited, a level of education, a level of intelligence that I used to try to help my family. Okay. So that's kind of how my background and my beginning started. We come from a rural, small community. Everybody worked hard, and being selfless was a part of that. Being selfless, and when someone would come over to your home and you knew they hadn't had anything to eat, and maybe we, had a small, modest amount, my dad would always make sure to share that with those who came to our home. So, helping others has always been a part of who I was. And
how many people in your family?
Well, I have 2 sisters and 1 brother. My younger sister's a lawyer. She works out of New York City.
She's a powerhouse too. I've had the chance to meet her.
Yes. So, and my older sister, she lives in Texas. She's retired, and I have a brother who lives in Las Vegas. He's working there as well, him and his wife.
Nice.
And my mom and dad are from big families. My dad had 14 brothers and sisters. My mom had 7 brothers and sisters. So big family.
Wow.
Always about family.
Yes.
All right.
So as you guys were progressing up, you realized that you had this spirit to want to give and help others. You at some point you have to decide where you're going to take your life, how you're going to do that. How is it that you decided to go to law school?
I was never really much of an athlete. I'm not very skilled or as, perhaps a craft. My dad was a concrete man, and I was left-handed, and that's not something that really goes hand in hand, being left-handed and being a concrete finisher. But I've always been very competitive, a debater, some would say argumentative, and I have, always pushed in that regard. So, for a long time, teachers, friends, my pastor in church would say, "You should go to law school. You should go to law school." And that was not my intention when I first started out. When I went to undergraduate, I wanted to come back and help my dad. I was going to school for construction management focus, and I wanted to help my dad with his concrete business and help it grow. So even in that realm, when I graduated from undergraduate at the University of Denver and went back to work for my dad as a construction project manager for him, I found myself in legal situations quite a bit, in that I had to interpret contracts. There was issues regarding prevailing wage rates. All this had a legal ramification associated with it. So after a year of doing that, and my dad and my mom pushing me to return to school, I decided to go to law school. Initially, my goal in law school was to come out and be a construction lawyer. And, things have a way of taking care of themselves. So after I completed my law degree at University of Colorado in Boulder, trying to get work, first job I came upon was working as a family lawyer with a law firm in Vegas. And that allowed me to get into court quite a bit. So there I honed my skill set so far as being in front of judges, being in courtrooms, examining witnesses, doing direct examinations. And that's how the process began. It's something that I had a great passion for. I ended up doing exactly what I wanted to do, which is basically helping people. Helping people who otherwise would not have the ability to even have an attorney. So that's something that drove and motivated me. And once I heard, I can't recall who made this quote, but he was asked during an interview, what would you tell your child if, what kind of career should they take? What kind of career path should they get involved in to become successful like you? And I remember the response that was given was, do something that you love. Because if you do something that you love, it will never be work. It'll always be something that you enjoy. And doing something that you love and have a passion for is never work. And that's how I feel about this particular career path. This is something that I love. My career path has gone a lot of different directions, and I've represented people in a lot of different ways and manner. But the underlying facts associated with that is that these people need help. They can't help themselves, and they come to me to be their champion. And because I'm not from an extremely wealthy background, and the folks I grew up with are of modest means, the types of people that, when I first started practicing law, they were not rich. And typically they were minorities or poor people or the underserved. So that allowed me to be their champion. That allowed me to press on their behalves. And what I find myself is I started this off by saying I was very competitive. I don't like people mistreating those people who are unprivileged, underserved, or just because of the status they have in life. And a lot of times folks are not expecting somebody to fight so hard for somebody who has so little. And it wouldn't matter to me. That's the kind of person I definitely want to represent.
That is incredible. You mentioned something that I want to go back to for a second. You mentioned that you had family, friends, your pastor all saying you should go to law school. That's in a way mentorship. Has mentorship been a big part of your life as something that you can look back on and say, man, I had some really great mentors? Was that something fundamental to you, or was that something you just kind of picked up along the way from people and a piece of advice here, a piece of wisdom there?
Yes. I have received great mentoring from a number of different sources. Again, my father being the one who's given me the great foundation of having a work ethic. Work hard, no matter what kind of job you have. Work hard. I started out with my first job where I got a paycheck. I was 12 years old, making $1 an hour for my dad.
Wow.
And from there, every job I've had, I've always had that work ethic where work hard, work long, and outwork the next man or the next woman. The other mentors I've had were, I could say one of the greatest mentors I had was my third grade teacher, Mr. Felgar. And he opened my eyes to furthering myself with education, even in the third grade. I'll never forget that man. He was always pushing and letting my parents know. Came to my house when we were living in a trailer, and told my parents that your son, keep pushing him. He has something that he could share with this world, and I'll never forget him and his impact he had on my life. Going through, and when I got into college, I had great mentors there as well. helping me understand the value of a dollar and someone else's dollar. That's something that I think I learned from my mentor in my first law firm that I worked with, Nicholas Santoro. Nick Santoro is still a very dear friend of mine to this day. He's a practicing lawyer in Vegas. And, I remember when I was working for him, when I would do hourly wage work and bill people by the hour, and he would have to review my invoices before they go out to clients, one of the things that always would stand to me, he said, listen, look at this. If you would give this bill to your dad, who we all affectionately know, called Papa G, if you would have gave this to Papa G and he looked at it, what would his response be? And this made me become more mindful of how I spend somebody else's money, okay? So that's something that I've taken with me as well. And, these mentors, through and including Joe Ramos, have always, I feel like I could always learn something from someone. And yes, they have been impactful in my life and how I handle myself to this day.
Well, you handle yourself incredibly well. And you and I have had this conversation privately and to a degree, but I want to go deeper into something that I can only imagine because I have never experienced it. And that was some of the ways that you had to overcome adversity through your schooling, even up into law school, especially, our law schools aren't filled with black men and women or minority men and women of every sort. If you look at what it makes up an average law class or an average number of types of classes, oftentimes there is not a lot of representation of equality if you look at that by skin color. What was that experience like for you? What lessons did you take? How did you navigate that? Because I know that was a tough, from my interpretation of your experience, it was tough. It wasn't easy.
Well, yes, that is correct, Dr. Hoven. It began in grade school through my higher education and right on through the law school. One of the things that, again, makes up who I am to this day is, and this competitive drive is being underestimated, being told that you can't do something, expectations being based just on what I look like, color of my skin. I have always found myself in classes when I was growing up that were the higher level classes. Well, with that meant oftentimes I'd be the only black person in the class. And also, I didn't grow up on what they would call the black side of town. I grew up in a community that was very well integrated, mostly military. So the classes that I were in grade school were primarily white, and my friends and the students I went with were around or exposed to were black and white. So when I was in class, I'd find myself having to defend myself intellectually for just being there. Why are you in this classroom? Like I said, back then in the 70s and the 80s, bullying was not something that was protected against the way it is to this day. So you just had to fend for yourself. And you couldn't just jump up and start fighting with people. So I would have to defend myself intellectually and defend why I was there, and I'm just as smart as you. Conversely, because I didn't live on the black side of town and my parents were middle class, modest means, the black students would pick on me as well. And I would have to deal with that level of, you think you special, you think you rich or whatever. Got bullied on that side as well. So I had to defend myself intellectually on that ground. So I was always finding myself in a situation where I was debating, arguing, defending, and it just carried with me to this day. The last instance where I can recall where I had this issue was in my orientation the first day of law school, when they broke us out into groups, and it was 4 white guys and myself. And one of the guys wanted to bully me, and he says, "Well, what are you doing here? Are you on scholarship, or are you an athlete?" and I'm here just the same way you are. I'm here to get my law school education. But it just struck me that I thought, well, I'm out of Vegas, I'm out of undergrad, now I'm in law school. Now we're here to really get down and focus on our own careers individually and collectively. And still, this person, he saw me as, somebody he didn't deserve to be there. And, I get emotional when I talk about it, but I never allow that emotion to interfere with my ability to go forward. I just looked at it as a driving factor. I'm gonna prove these folks that I deserve to be here. I'm gonna prove to these folks, that I'm capable. And so I carry that. Someone would say it's a chip on my shoulder. I carry that chip on my shoulder in the courtroom. I look at, when I represented folks in civil rights cases, oftentimes the people who I represented my clients against are represented by big time law firms because the employer has a lot of money to hire big time law firms. And I would just be me.
Yeah.
Clarence Edwin. and
associates.
And that would be it. And I would surprise them that I was capable of standing up to them and fighting for my clients because, good or bad, once I become involved with you as your attorney and you become my client, I take your case on emotionally and personally. Like it's my own mom or my own dad or my own sister, my own brother. Because again, these folks a lot of times can't speak for themselves and they've been mistreated. And that's the same thing when I represent injury folks. They may find themselves in a position where an insurance company or whomever, don't believe them, don't believe that they're hurt. Well, having met them or seen them and spoken with them, I get a feel for them. I know, well, this person, they hurt, and sometimes they get the short end just because they're not wealthy, they're not articulate, perhaps they're here in this country undocumented, and they find themselves being discounted. I don't like that.
That doesn't sit well. And as you start meeting clients and coming to them now, we'll move up to the present time. You are, again, such a valuable asset, huge, important piece of what we do here at Ramos Law. You take these cases of people who have been injured, and it's funny, we've had to almost watch you from yourself, protect you from yourself, right? We were talking about this the other day where, man, just every case that comes in, you just want to make sure that you're giving all, and you're so busy with helping all these people that sometimes we got to say, hey, man, let us help you, let other attorneys step in and do some of the load. What is it that you love most about the personal injury specific side? You've talked about being a champion. You've talked about fighting for the underdog, making sure that you're out there. Is there something uniquely special about personal injury that absolutely lights your fire?
These folks are hurt. Okay, so, one day they're going about their lives, going to work, going to school, or carrying on how they would typically carry on, and the next day they're hurt. And then somebody's trying to tell them, no, you're not really hurt, or trying to diminish what they're going through. That don't sit well with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you see that, is there something? How do you coach your clients through that situation when someone tells them, and how do they tell them? From my perspective, they tell them like, you know what? Here's what your case is that shows you that you're not really hurt, and I'll even tell you to your face you're not really hurt. Mm-hmm. How do you help the clients not go nuts and just go crazy when they hear that?
Well, what I try to do is I tell all my clients to focus on your recovery, okay? We're going to convince whoever we need to convince what you're going through is real. And then try to take that stress off them because what they're going through is stressful. They're in pain. Their lives have been disrupted. Perhaps their vehicle hasn't been fixed. Perhaps they've missed some time from work. So what I want to do is make sure my clients are focusing on their recovery, not interfere with that. Let them worry about getting better, getting back to where they were before it happened. On the other hand, what I do, on the legal side, or my job as a lawyer, is work these insurance adjusters and make them understand, hey, this person didn't need this. You know, you think everybody is just trying to get a payday? You think they wouldn't have rather just moved on with their life and continued doing what they want to do? Not everybody's out to try to get a payday. Some people, most people, they're hurt and they just want to get back to where they were. And the worse they're hurt, the more they would be rather just give you back your check or give you back your injury claim if you can give them back their health. Okay? So I look at it from that standpoint. Especially you got people who were just doing fine. You know, they were loving their family, supporting their loved ones, going to work, going to school, and then all of a sudden they get into an accident that's not their fault. Who needs that? Who really needs that? Who really needs that?
Nobody's got time for that.
Nobody's got time for that. So I try to get the adjuster, the lawyer for the insurance company, or the lawyer for the employee or employer to say, hey, just stand back for a minute and think. Do you really think that this person has decided, okay, I'm going to wake up in the morning and get over on you? No, that's not typically what happens. Typically what happens is a person's life is disrupted through an unexpected event that was not within their control. And I try to reset that mindset, you know?
Is that effective? Do the insurance adjusters and the opposite counsel that you work with to try to resolve these things, when you bring it to them, are you find that most of them are pretty reasonable, or do they dig their heels in the sand and go, no, because they've got margins to protect, they've got other things? How have you found the response to that? Because the approach is so commonsensical to me, if that's a word. It just makes so much sense what you're saying, that if you bring that to them and they don't understand that then there might be another agenda, that they're not trying to take care of their own people or the people they're responsible to.
Well, I have found that being persistent, consistent, typically works in getting your point across. And with rare exception, I'm usually able to convince someone who perhaps is skeptical that this is not something you should be skeptical of. And those who aren't convinced, you know, there are other ways to convince them, and we have to take it beyond just a letter or a phone call or an email. We could do that. I mean, we're prepared to do that. Again, I once I'm involved in a case, I'm involved in the case. And fortunately, having worked here at this law firm as long as I've worked here at this law firm, and knowing knowing Dr. Ramos, and knowing other doctors who work with our firm, you get a good feel and understanding of the medicine. And having a good feel and understanding of the medicine allows you to better be able to convince and articulate your client's position, okay? Because a lot of times the folks that you're dealing with, you know, they don't have access to the medical staff that we have access to. And that's what this job is about. This job is about making certain those who are in a position to take care of your client legally understand the medicine. And, you know, before I came here, I might not have had the ability to go to a doctor and pick up the phone and go through some records and get a better understanding. Now I do. And now I'm not afraid of what their doctor, meaning the insurance company's doctor or the business owner's doctor, is going to be able to discount what my client is going through or what my client is saying, because I have an understanding of the medicine and I'm able to explain it in a way that they have to concede. You know, they just have to concede. See, not every case involves somebody with a leg amputation or some stark injury that is just apparently obvious. Some injuries are such that it takes time to develop the recovery or develop the diagnosis. And my ability or an attorney's ability to better explain that goes a long way in being able to convince an insurance company or a business owner's lawyer, you know, this is certainly something that you have to take care of. So that's that's how, it's been helpful for me to work with a firm that has such a strong medical underpinning.
Yeah.
Because this is what this is about. I mean, injuries about someone's medical diagnosis and what their recovery entails and how it's going to impact them, short term, near term, and long term.
Yeah. And so is there any cases that are outstanding to you where just remarkable, either the story of how the person was injured and then once you did your storytelling
Sure.
and your educating, that the person that you were speaking with and working with on the case, the adjuster, if you will, said, you know what, you're right. We didn't look at it that way. Is there one that sticks out of your mind, or just a case that you really helped to a tremendous amount?
There's one in particular that I will never forget this case. There was an elderly lady who was involved in a rather serious car accident that didn't involve broken bones or immediate surgery. However, at the scene and at the hospital later on, they believed she was having a heart attack. And they ran a bunch of tests, a lot of diagnostic intervention, and luckily she didn't have a heart attack and she recovered. Well, this resulted in a huge bill that her car insurance company and their car insurance company, the person who caused the crash, didn't want to pay. Said it was all unrelated. Well, going through the medical records and seeing the diagnosis, there was 3 primary diagnoses. Number 1 was Takotsubo syndrome, and the next was a neck sprain, and then the third was motor vehicle collision. So I'm like, Takotsubo syndrome, what does that mean? Well, we have doctors here at this law firm. I gave the medical records to one of the doctors here at the law firm. I said, I need you to research this and find out what this means. He brought back to me a boatload of medical research supporting what Takotsubo syndrome actually is. In the 40s and during World War II, they called this the broken heart syndrome. And what the doctors learned was that this diagnosis, this ailment, mimicked a heart attack. And postmenopausal women were prone to this mimicking of a heart attack following a traumatic event. And they call it broken-hearted syndrome because when in World War II, when they would notify a woman or a married woman that her husband had died in World War II, oftentimes some of these women would have what they thought to be a heart attack, but it was actually Takotsubo syndrome. Takotsubo was Dr. Takotsubo from Japan, who first discovered this diagnosis. It doesn't leave permanent scarring like a heart attack would with scar tissue and the like. You recover from it, but it gives the same symptoms as a heart attack. So I found out, one of the doctors at our law firm found all this research for me and wrote me up an opinion. I shared that opinion within a letter to the insurance company with the research, changed their mind. They went from, this is a small case, we'll deal with the cervical strain, to all of this care she received at the hospital was related to the traumatic event she was involved with and the diagnosis of Takotsubo syndrome, AKA broken heart disease. And it worked out. Now, I've never had a Takotsubo syndrome case since, but I'll never forget this one because I would have never known in a million years that this diagnosis, and she was postmenopausal, she was involved in a traumatic event, and she thought she was having a heart attack, and they tested her and ran up the diagnosis just like it was a heart attack. So that was the most memorable case I believe that I've had since I've worked at this firm. That
is an incredible story. And I know I've heard it before, but every time it just makes me smile of the intensity that you looked at that, and you weren't willing to just take the topical answer that you were getting. You dug deeper, you asked for resources, you got those, and then you pushed. And so every time I hear that, it just brings me joy. When someone has been involved in an accident or injury, when they have something, whether it be through a car accident that wasn't their fault or maybe they were bit by a dog or something that falls under personal injury. Is there a list of must-dos, should-dos, things that people should look at doing that help them navigate that waters, both for themselves and to make sure they're protected?
Well, certainly, one of the ways that I advise my client is I said, well, if you're hurt, you got to treat. If you're not hurt, don't treat. So I would ask that a person who contacted me who has not been to a doctor yet and they're hurting, go to their doctor. If they have a primary care doctor, go to their primary care doctor. If they don't have a primary care doctor, go to urgent care. Definitely want to do that. Find out what's going on with you. Because if you are hurt, you should treat. Whether you have a injury claim against an insurance company or not, do what you would do if you had a common cold or you had the flu. If you're sick, you're going to go to the doctor. So I assume that folks who are hurt will find their way to a doctor. Now, not everybody has health insurance. And if you don't have health insurance, certainly a firm like ours can help you get treatment without having health insurance. But if you have health insurance, you have Medicaid, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have Anthem, go to your doctor. Tell them what happened to you. That way that no one can later on say, well, that person must not have been hurt. They didn't go to the doctor. Okay? I assume that if you are hurt, you're going to treat. I know for a fact that it doesn't always require a huge crash to be hurt. I was on my way to court one day, and I was late, and I was at a stop sign or a stoplight, and someone just barely ran into the back of my car. Since I was in a hurry, I jumped out, looked, didn't see much damage, and the driver who got out smelled liquor on his breath. I'll never forget it. And I was like, you know what? I gotta go. I didn't get his information. I didn't take a picture of his driver's license or his license plate. And after I went to court, because I wasn't hurting, I didn't feel bad, I didn't, anything to that effect. The next day, back tightened up, neck hurting, I ended up having to treat. And didn't have insurance information for the driver who hit me, didn't have an identity of who that driver was. So I just ended up paying it out of pocket until I got better. And this was years and years ago, but it always reminded me, if you get involved in a car accident, make sure you get the information from the other driver, even if the police don't show up. Take a picture of the other driver's vehicle. If the driver will let you, take a picture of his driver's license and his insurance information and his license plate to his car. And be mindful that not always you're going to immediately start feeling pain, because sometimes drilling's taking over and you're not really thinking about it and you have something else to do. But if you end up having to go treat anyway, and it's not your fault, somebody should be responsible for taking care of what you're out.
That's right. That happened to me once too. I was driving to pick my wife up from the airport, and I got hit from behind and did a little damage to my car, a lot of damage to his car. And we had to wait for the police to come. Just everything you said. CJ, I took pictures, got picture of his insurance card, do the whole thing. And the police were so behind that we had waited 45 minutes. My wife was at the airport now. Her flight had landed. And I said, she texted me. She goes, are you almost here to pick me? I said, well, someone came in hot into the back of our car. And she's like, oh, no, So I told the guy this. After I called the sheriff's department 2 times and said, look, what's the deal? I went to the guy and I said, we got 2 ways to handle this. 1, we can just wait here, and it could be hours before something happens. Or 2, I got my phone here, and I'm going to turn on the video, and I'm going to be standing next to you in the video, and you're just going to say what happened, that, inadvertently you ran into the back of me, and we're good to go. You good with that? And he goes, yeah, we're good with that. Is that a good idea to try to get something on video to ask someone to do that if that's the case and the police don't show up?
Well, at a minimum, I think you should get that person's driver's license if he was willing or she's willing to give it to you, or take a picture of their license plates on their car, because insurance companies will claim that you wasn't in that accident if you don't have any proof of it. What I would not want is a situation to escalate. Unfortunately, I've represented a couple of clients who what would be considered a normal car accident ended up being a road rage incident where the other driver in a hostile fashion attacks the client.
Oh, wow.
I've had a client, beaten unmercifully just because they wanted to call the police out to document the accident. So be mindful of that. There's some crazy folks out here.
What a great point. No, I'm so glad. Yeah, you got to read the situation.
Read the situation, get as much information you can. But if you see this person is highly agitated and you don't want to, turn something from an accident involving a motor vehicle collision into, a felony attack upon you, be mindful of that. I mean,
what a great
just
point.
use common sense in that regard and kind of go from there.
Well, this has been amazing. Amazing. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
If you've been given a piece of advice along the way, or you've learned along the way that has been fundamental to who you've become, as successful as you've become, the good human being, the great father and husband that you've become, is there just one thing that maybe you haven't shared with us already besides your father's imprinting upon you for hard work and mentorship? Is there something that you would share with me and with our audience that we could hold on to make our lives better?
Well, this is probably, been said over and over again by many different other folks, but it's something that I try to use as a guiding principle with me. Treat people like you want to be treated. Treat people like you want to be treated, and that will serve you well.
That's beautiful. Now, if someone had an accident, has a question, or actually I got one more question, really important, really, really, really important, before I ask how they can get a hold of you. Would you have any words of wisdom for someone who wanted to follow in your footsteps, whether it be minority individual or not, as far as becoming a lawyer? Is there anything for the students out there, someone maybe wanting to change careers and go into law, again, regardless of who they are? Maybe you want to focus it to someone who's a minority candidate. What would you say to them?
Well, one of the things I learned while I was in law school is that you don't have to have any type of particular degree to get into law school. I thought it was always, you have to major in political science or major in English. Pre-law was the term that was thrown about in undergraduate. And what I say to that person or who's contemplating getting into law school and they're still in undergraduate or they've already graduated and they don't think they have the right degree to get into law school, you don't need any particular degree to apply to law school. I had classmates who were art majors. I had classmates who were theater majors. I had a classmate who was a concert pianist, music major, and they were in law school. Another piece of advice that I would give someone who was finishing up undergraduate and thinking about going right into law school is that you don't necessarily have to go directly from undergraduate to law school. Life experience is great experience to become a lawyer. And the valedictorian of our class was in his 60s. And he had a long and a very interesting life, had already finished his career and retired, and then went back to law school. And I believe that life experience that he had allowed him to excel in law school. So if you're thinking about taking a year off and maybe working and getting some life experience, put a little money in your pocket, there's nothing wrong with that. That might actually help you become a better lawyer because you can see things through the eye of someone who's out there, who's been in the real world, as opposed to going straight from elementary school to high school to law school to undergraduate to law school. A little life experience never hurts.
I love that. Now, if someone wanted to get a hold of you to learn more, to talk with you, to share what happened to them, any best way that you would like for them to get a hold of you?
Sure. Reach out at the law firm, 303-733-6353. Just ask for Clarence. Usually I'm here. That's one of the things about having a passion for what you do. You're somewhat of a workaholic. So I can talk about two things, morning, noon, and night, or three things. Now, number one is my boys, my twin sons. Number two is the law. And number three is bird dogs, because I raised and trained and hunted and competed bird dogs for many, many years. And to this day, anybody want to talk to me about a bird dog, I will find time to talk to them about a bird dog.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to do another episode on bird dogs, dog training, and dog experience. Is that fair?
I would love to. Bring me back.
We're coming back. Well, listen, this has been a great adventure for me, hearing your story and especially feeling your emotion and your passion, all of it. For those of you watching and listening, no matter where you are, I know you feel this, and I know you can see that Clarence is making a difference. CG makes a difference, but he's not the only one. You too can make a difference. So go out there, get busy, do what you got to do to make a difference, and we'll see you next time.